We all hear more deals, more time, more money. But after 20 years in real estate, Owen's learned that freedom doesn't come from getting more. It comes from knowing when to pivot, when to pause, and when to walk away from a deal. He's built and sold hundreds of deals, flipped hundreds more, and financed millions through private lending. He's been through every kind of market, from the chaos of '08 to the rocket fuel run up of the 2000s, to the rate shock slowdowns we're living through now, and he's still standing, still building, and still learning. In this episode, we dig into what 2 decades of the game really teaches you: how to adapt when the tides turn, how to build relationships that outlast the cycles, and how the easy money years can actually cost you and make you soft. We talk about storytelling as a superpower, how it turns lenders into partners instead of gatekeepers, and why the people who survive every downturn are the ones who know their numbers and know themselves. This isn't a hype conversation about quick wins or overnight success. It's a behind the curtain peek at what happens after the dust settles and the market changes once again. Because at the end of the day, we're not just talking about real estate. We're talking about what freedom actually looks like and how you can earn it the hard way. Hello and welcome. You've been in the real estate game for a little bit now, and you've seen hundreds of investors come and go since you've been doing this for the last 10, 15 years. What do you think separates the ones who build real freedom from the ones who just stay chasing their tail?
I think belief. The ones that typically dip out are ones that, they maybe got in during a hot time in the market. So say any time in the teens, basically, up to probably 21, 22. Anybody that existed in real estate during that time probably made a pile of cash, right? Because you just needed a house. It didn't have to be the right house, right? So inventory was more important than buying the right deal, I think. The ones that got out when it got hard are the ones that had a business model that didn't adapt to stress in the market. So what we're seeing right now is you try to underwrite a deal with 7% debt, it doesn't pencil. It's so because sellers haven't adjusted their pricing to accept that people aren't willing to buy it for what they want to actually sell it for because they're used to 2021 pricing. So I think it's belief in your systems and having the ability to withstand the punches. And I think a lot of people that really got active during those times, when the music stopped, they're like, what do I do now? Because the way that they were generating cash income, cash flow went away. And if you didn't have another business or another source of income to supplement everything that you had going on in real estate, it washed out a lot of people. It's the whole adage of the rising tide lifts all ships. When it goes out, you see who's swimming naked. A lot of people were naked.
Yeah, so I got in right at the tail end of that in 22 was when I bought my first one. So I was going through the education when everybody's like, oh, in 21 this is great. And then 22 came and I hit the ground running pretty fast. And then the brakes fell off, or the brakes locked up. And I was like, ooh, this is different than what I've been reading about and learning about and stuff. So it's been a lot slower than 23 and 24 has been a lot slower. But I had to pivot. And it actually goes back to something you asked me years ago. You asked me basically a question of, how'd you ask it? What do you plan on doing when the cash runs out? It's kind of framework of how you asked it. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, I'm just going to burn out all this stuff and it's going to be good. Like, I don't know what you're asking. So like, for me, it was like, I didn't know what you meant. I mean, I do now, but at the time I was just like, you just burn it and then it's free cash. So.
Perpetual motion. Burr machine.
Yeah, just you get it going and it just, once you get the machine going, it never stops. So, but yeah, it stopped pretty quickly after that question.
The thing is though, I can't say that I maybe wouldn't have done something similar if I had started at a different time. I got started in 2005. So that was right before the great financial crisis, everything, that was that was bad. Mm-hmm. So what we're seeing right now, to me, I'm kind of like, everyone's like, oh, 7%, like the interest rates are so high. And I'm like, that's exactly how they were when I got started. Like my first mortgage was 7%. And I did an 80-20 loan. So I had a 7% mortgage and a 9% mortgage, right? And that because they were liar loans back then. You can get basically sign your name and fog a mirror and you can get a loan. But so it's all relative to when you start. So if you got in the teens and everything was just going like this, and even like the later part where everything was hockey sticking, then now it's kind of more like just, steady eddy type of an environment. Interest rates are kind of just hovering around the same mark. It's much tougher to operate, especially if you're used to the easy times.
And I just got done with a book called Quit. Have you ever read that one? It's a phenomenal one. And it's basically about knowing when to move on and when to give up. And what I like about what you said is during the teens, when you have a tailwind, everyone's gonna do well. Like just doing real estate, you're going to make some kind of money. But then when that headwind comes, the ones who are able to withstand that are the ones that are actually going to gain altitude. And I mean, there's many things that I've had to pivot on. Like my strategy when I got started in 2020 is not at all remotely like what it is now. But I don't see the 7% as a reason not to do real estate, just to change the strategy. Like I'm maybe going into deals, putting 30-40% down, whereas before I was as little money as possible. And my house mortgage, I have a 2.5% interest rate. I will never sell that. I have no desire to refinance it. Like the strategy for that meets the interest rates where it was at. So I think that knowing when to pivot is being knowledgeable about how to operate in those environments. And because you started in the 7%, it's almost like you're implementing a playbook of like, I know what to do when this happens. So what other bumps and bruises as far as the lending environment has changed your philosophy and how you invest now?
I think right now, if you know how to put a deal together that will work for you, and you can articulate that to somebody that's selling a property and your reason why, and you can understand their motivations, I think that leads to a lot more productive conversation with putting something together rather than just writing a blind offer and asking them to finance 100% of the deal. I think mutual understanding with your sellers, if you can get, in front of them, you can have a lot more productive conversation because you can describe what's going on with them, right? They know it too. Like, hey, I get it. You probably don't want to sell because you have a low interest rate, or maybe they're really motivated, but they would just want to hang on to that price because they're used to 2021. But I think if you talk about what's going on at a macro level and then bring it back to, okay, what does this mean to you? What does it mean to me? How can we make this work together? I know you don't want this asset anymore, but you'd also don't want to give it away. Is that fair? And then, you can have a productive conversation with it. But the lending environment right now, I think, I have a little bit of a cheat code since I have a hard money business, and I've learned a lot more about financing in the last 5 years since we've been operating that. And I've made so many more connections. So to me, I have a little bit of an advantage over somebody that's just maybe used to dealing with one bank or a couple banks. And they're like, well, they said no, I guess I'm out. Now I'm kind of like, okay, I heard no from them, but I know they may be overweight in the type of loans that they have out there because every bank is different, right? Especially smaller ones. They may get really overweight in, say, multifamily, or maybe they have too many types of one project that they're doing. And the bank committee is going to be like, look, we're way overweight here. There's a lot more risk. And they want to de-risk their loan portfolio by concentrating in other areas. So just because they said no to you doesn't necessarily mean they don't want to ever do business with you. It's just the timing. And so that was something that I have learned more about in the last 5 years, is how the financing and the back end of that works and how banks actually look at projects, because we have to look at it the same way. Being an asset-based lender is a little bit different than, just a mortgage lender that needs a FICO and, all your tax returns and pull your pants down and show me all your financial statements and everything. Like, it's a little different, but that's very similar because the deal has to make sense. The borrower has to have a good head on their shoulders and know how to execute on a business plan. And then we can suss out the rest of the details, right? But I think the connections have been something that has been really helpful for me.
And I see that as a true competitive advantage. And the way that you approach lenders is you're inviting them into an opportunity. And I always advise clients, I worked when I was doing bigger pockets leads, and I was getting 3-4 phone calls a week where I was just mentoring people on how to get started. And that's what I would tell them is when you're approaching a lender, you're not begging for money. Like when you're younger and you're getting your first car loan, you're like, hey, I make money. Can you give me money?
Please help me, sir.
Exactly. It's you're begging. But when you're bringing investment opportunities, the exact same thing. All the banks work on a risk premium. And they might say that multifamily, they're putting a 300 basis point spread on the 5-year treasury. They're willing to take on that much risk. If they're over leveraged and they have too much C-class multifamily, they'll say, okay, we'll do it at 400 basis point spread, but that's why the rates don't work for that one. And so I would say go to 5 different lenders, see what all of them will do, put them on a spreadsheet. Some of them might say we'll do a 20-year note, some will do a 15, and you just move all the pieces and see them. When you put them on a spreadsheet, you can see what makes me the most money. And doesn't mean that it's a bad deal. It's just they don't want to do the deal right now.
I had a really interesting coffee meetup last week. So did you go? I can't remember if you went to that, Ryan. So we had, there was a new bank that I started working with in Council Bluffs called Mid-States Bank. And I got to know the president or the regional VP. I'm not sure what her title is. Everybody's a VP at a bank. But I was dealing with a couple of people there, commercial lender, and then more on the executive level. They came to my meetup and they started following me on social media, which is a little like, cause I'm out on social media quite a bit, and some of the stuff I post is really random, and I'm walking through terrible houses and whatever. So I'm like, how's a lender going to look at this? But they're super cool. But then anyway, they came to the meetup, right? And we probably had, I don't know, 20, 25 people there. And it was super interesting because we got to ask them questions that you don't ever get to ask them when you're going in to try and get a loan, right? So you're telling them about a project and they're like, okay, we have to take it to committee and all those things. And so we got to ask them, like, what does your committee actually meet about? Like, do you guys know about this already and you guys are just getting ready and having a beer on Friday? You know, I mean, like that was the conversation.
Committee's like Illuminati.
Yeah,
You know
exactly.
it exists, but
exactly.
No one's ever seen it.
So we got to like pull back the curtain on what they actually talk about. And what I really took away from that was they want to hear a story. They don't want to just have your financials and click through a bunch of Excel spreadsheets and look at your tax returns and then make a decision. They want you to sell them. Like, why is this deal going to work? Why are you bankable? Why should my company take a risk on you? And that was really interesting to me. So I've always been a big fan of story selling, right? You can articulate something in a way that's entertaining, but also get the message across. It goes so much further than just like bullet points on an email or a spreadsheet, right? And so that was really fun conversation. But looking kind of behind the curtain on how banking decisions are made, they're people too, right? If they're like, man, you know, Tanner, he had a rough go the last couple of years, but I really believe in him and he has a really good story. And I think based on his track record and his drive and determination, he can execute on this plan. I think we can take a risk on him. But if you're just sending that in blind and trying to shop for the lowest quarter point, you know, reduction in rate that you can get, I don't like that approach at all. I like the relationship one, you know, where you go in and you spend time with them, you find out what are they looking for as a banker. And that's important too. So I don't think they get asked that a lot. It's more of like, what can you do for me? Not, well, how can we work together and make this mutually beneficial? Who can I introduce you to? What type of loans are you looking for? You know, because we all know business owners, right? We're all in real estate and entrepreneurs and whatever. So we kind of rub elbows with those type of people. Those are good referrals for banks. And so like the outcome of that was like, I know, you know, Dane Peterson, he's like, hey, I'm going to call, you know, I'm going to call Chris or Daryl that attended the meeting. And then a couple other people were like, hey, can you give me their number? And I'm like, that's awesome. So they came to the meeting and it was super helpful for everyone, but it also helped them out. So that's why you can't do that from behind a computer, you know?
How do you climb that ladder? So you go to a bank and you're going for a commercial loan. You know, you go to the vice president of the commercial lending. And so you think that's a person, like not just a entry-level analyst, was basically what they are. You know? But like in your head, you see vice president of commercial lending and you think they're pretty high up. But in reality, they have 20 bosses above them to get to the executive level. So how do you climb that ladder to get to the executive level? Because the larger you go, the higher it goes up in the food chain as far as the committee. And the higher the buy-off. So how do you get your story, I guess, more precisely to that higher level when you're at a gatekeeper?
I think it becomes a lot easier with age and experience. That's the first thing. So me being 50 years old, I may be dealing with a VP in air quotes that's 30, you know? And so like odds are I probably know a lot more than that person does just based on my lifespan. So I think you get comfortable with getting referred higher when you have more of a mutual, you know, age. So I think it's hard. It's a challenge for somebody that's 25, right? To go in and they see a VP level and they're like, I'm young. You feel intimidated by somebody that's older than you and more experienced, has the title. But I think referrals go a long way. So the more you can network with people and connect with them and get buy-in, the more comfortable they're going to be in referring you to their banking relationship. So I think referrals is number one. Number two is my favorite banks to deal with are the ones that have one branch, two branches, maybe three. Small town banks, regional banks. I don't like dealing with US Bank, Wells Fargo. I never have, right? So The ones that operate more like a family owned business are the kind of small town banks, right? They like relationships. They want you to come in. They like the story.
All their members are farmers.
Yes.
Yep,
Yeah.
that's the best.
That's how I grew my whole business by using small town banks and small regional banks. I think like between two of them that I did a ton of banking with until I kept bumping into their legal lending limit and I had to go elsewhere. There were one bank had 2 branches, the other one had 1. And it was my hometown bank. And the owner of the bank was my assistant baseball coach in high school. Like, so
You had a good relationship.
Yeah. Like my family still lives there. He's literally known me my whole life. So that was easy. So I had an advantage there, obviously. But yeah, I think so. To bring it all back, I think when you get more experience, it becomes easier. Obviously, when you have connections, that makes it so much faster and easier. And dealing with so many less layers than a huge bank, that's the way to go when you're trying to break through and get financing on your first deal or maybe your first couple of deals.
You mentioned something that I don't think most people realize, but banks, smaller banks especially, have a legal limit on how much they can lend.
Yep.
And so you just think this bank just has this endless,
Mm-hmm.
pot of money, but that's not true. Like the smaller bank you go to, you might only be able to pull $1 million or
Yep.
$2 million or something like that in loans from them, and then you have to go on to the next bank. So
You know what's crazy though? Like this small bank that I was dealing with, and their legal lending limit for one person or any entity that you're a member of. So you can't like game the system by like, oh, surprise, I'm over here in this LLC now. It's not me. You can loan to me. They know that, right? So they have to deal with bank examiners that come in and look at all their books. So they audit their files. And if you have a loan if you're dealing with a small town bank and you have a big, let's say you have an $800,000 loan on a $1 million loan limit, that's going to pop out, right? So they're going to look at your file and odds are they're going to go through it and probably ask a lot more questions. But I think the interesting thing I learned too is, yes, they have a legal lending limit and it's based on their deposits, right? So banks can loan out, I think, $9 for every dollar they have on deposit in the bank. So it's a huge snowball effect. And so small banks, a lot of times will look for other small banks that they can acquire just to get their deposits. So then they can continue growing because it's a 9x multiple on that. And the other interesting thing I learned, I didn't know this until, I don't know, probably 7-8 years ago. Banks do participation a lot more than anyone realizes. And what I mean by that is basically if you get to a point where you're maxing out the amount of loans you can take out of a bank, that bank, if they want to do continue doing business with you, they can call other banks and they typically will have a short list or a network and they'll say, we have $500,000 worth of loans. Here's the borrower. And they basically give them your bio. Now the bank that you're dealing with, not the new bank, but the bank you're dealing with, they're going to continue servicing the loan. It just goes on somebody else's books and you may not even know that's happening. So you see that a lot of times in more like Fannie Freddie type origination loans where owner occupants are going to get FHA or whatever. Those loans get sold all the time. Like you may start out with, US Bank and it may go to Mr. Cooper and then it may go to Wells Fargo and you're like, I just got another random bank statement in the mail from this bank I've never heard of. And they're like, hey, surprise, we own your loan now. Send your money to us. It's just weird. And all this stuff happens behind the scenes. And I don't think, people that get in the lending or banking industry just don't know because there's no reason for you to. But there's a lot of machinations that happen behind the scenes there that it's really interesting to learn about.
yeah, it's banking's one thing. I think they make it obscure on purpose. You're talking about the 25-year-old banker. Like you walk in there and they're like, oh yeah, so things will go up about 25 bips, and you're like, what's a bip? And they make up these words instead of just saying 0.25% interest,
right?
Or basis points. Like they just make more obscure so that you can be. We're gonna make it as convoluted as possible so that you don't understand what we're talking about, and we'll just take your money.
I found the same thing, and I know you guys did too at the military, right? There's always acronyms for everything.
Oh, yeah.
And nobody else that's not in the military probably knows what a lot of them are. And that was the same. I worked for IBM for quite a while, and they have the same thing. It was just always alphabet soup, and everybody's throwing out all these acronyms. And the minute you start talking to somebody that isn't working there, they're like, "What are you talking? What are you talking about?"
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's a lot of explaining.
I really like what you're saying about storytelling because I found more success with putting together a portfolio. Here's my personal financial statement of real estate owned. here's, examples of cash flow, but people like to just give a highlight reel. They show everything's always been perfect and I'm awesome. But when I show, here's some mistakes that I've made and this is how I've corrected it so it's not going to happen again, they're a lot more receptive because they're like, okay, he's responsible. It's not just he got lucky on a few deals. He's actually taking the steps to fix things.
I had this really cool breakout session I went to at BPCon here, 3-4 weeks ago in Vegas. And there's a guy named Brian Burke that was talking, and he's a really well-known syndicator in multifamily real estate. And so he started as, I think he was a cop or a firefighter originally, had a bunch of firefighter or cop buddies, and basically his first few deals he pitched them, and they all wanted to be involved in real estate, but they hadn't done the homework like he had, and they trusted him, and he's a good dude. And he started putting deals together and grew and grew and grew and grew, and always did a good job with, I'm sure he had some hiccups, but he's known as a really good operator. He was in this room, right, with two other, it was Kathy and Rich Fetke, and then Brian Burke, and they both were pitching their latest deal that they were raising money for. Brian's was a pivot off of what he normally did, which was multifamily. And he was going to do senior living, and not converting senior living into multifamily. I'm talking like buying and operating a senior living facility or building one ground up. And what he did was he aligned with 4 major operators in that space and said, do you have the ability to staff this if we build it? Here's the facility, here's the scope, whatever. So he basically developed partnerships with them. In the room, they had a limited partner, a guy that had done over 100 deals. So he'd put money into all kinds of different projects, and they gave basically him the opportunity to tear apart each of their pitches. And then at the end, he said, thumbs up or thumbs down, I would invest with you today. And it was really cool to see the back and forth with that, because you got to hear the story and then you got to hear all the tough questions. Because normally it's just like pitch fest and you don't hear what happens afterwards. But he was like, it was just a great back and forth. And then they opened it up to the audience. So everybody got to ask the hard questions. My favorite interaction of that whole thing was Brian Burke gave his pitch. He did a really good job. He's very articulate, controlled the stage. And then the guy asked him, he said, okay, you've never done one of these before. Why should I invest now? Why don't I wait until you've had a proof of concept and have 2-3 of these under your belt before I put my money in with you? He thought about it for a second. He had a great answer. And he said, the reason is, if you look at my entire track record of being involved in real estate deals, I have tried something new this time. And he had a whole bunch of examples where he tried something new, not related to multifamily, not related to senior living, but he executed on it and it went well. It was a success. So he said, you're betting on my track record of being able to figure something out that's new to me, but I know how to operate the rest of it. So I know the people, the players, and the process. And that is what is going to make this successful. And the guy the LP sat back and he's like, that's a good answer, So I was just like, that was a really cool interaction that you don't get to see very often, kind of a peek behind the curtain.
So how do you balance being able to scale your real estate business with all these other opportunities versus just staying in what you know and what's worked?
Yeah, my problem a lot of times, or problem, gift, whatever, is I have a little bit of FOMO and I have a lot of bit of shiny object syndrome. So here's my deal. So if I get really interested in something, I get obsessed and I study it, I read about it, I listen to podcasts, I talk to people, I go deep, right? And it's to the detriment of other areas of my life. And so I was so obsessed with real estate when I first got started in it that's all I did for a while. And I learned everything that I could at the time before social media, before YouTube, before all that. And but I think balancing your question was more around like, how do you balance the
shiny object?
Yeah, the shiny object. I like it more now because I get bored doing the same thing over and over again. If I was just a guy that owned a business that did, plumbing or trucking or whatever, and I would get bored. I would get bored after a while, and I would have to have somebody handling the day-to-day stuff because I've always been a hunter and I don't like managing. Like, I like finding deals. I'm good at it. I'm good at dealing with sellers. I'm good at the conversations and everything. I'm a good director. I'm not a good manager. I don't want to deal with the drama and the people and the problems and everything else. That's why I like finding deals. I like buying deals, and I hate real estate after that because everything sucks. Yeah. It's like you're dealing with problems all the time. And I'm kind of like, if I have somebody that can handle that, run interference, I'm happy. But if I have to deal with the day-to-day, it just drives me crazy. And then I'll probably move on to something else.
I think that was one of our first conversations when I met you, because I mean, everyone has an Owen story, but when I was stationed in Minnesota and I just learned about Bigger Pockets, I listened to all the podcasts. When I Bigger Pockets, I was like, all right, I'm moving to Omaha soon. Like, I'm gonna start reaching out. Who's out here? And Owen came up, and I messaged him. It was probably something like, hey, what's a real estate? You know, like, and he was super welcoming. And our first conversation, I was like, so what do you like about real estate? He's like, I hate it. If I could make money without having to do real estate, I would.
Yeah.
But I eventually got licensed, and I have my core, clients that buy a lot of deals with me, and we're, exclusive. And then I'll find deals and I'll pitch them to people in the network. But I know that I will never have exclusivity with yourself or other people, because you're looking for opportunity everywhere and you don't tie yourself down. But I found a deal in Fremont when I was stationed in Fremont, and I brought it to Owen. I don't know if I ever told you this story. And he came up and walked it, and it was a multifamily, good deal. It penciled well. And so we submitted an offer, and they came back and wanted proof of funds. And his answer was, Google me. So tell them to Google me. And
oh my God, that's embarrassing.
He walked towards his car. He turned around. That sounded really arrogant. I'm sorry. I didn't mean that. That's my favorite Owen story.
That's pretty good. Oh, I totally forgot about that. Oh, that's such a douchey thing to say, but here we are.
You've pivoted, I guess, more shiny objects, if you will. Like, when I first met you, you were wholesaler, flipper, stuff like that. You've kind of let that. I remember a couple of years ago, you made a comment, I think I'll always flip. Just kind of was like in your blood. But now I can't say I don't know the last time you've done a flip. Are you still doing them, or?
Yeah, I have one going right now, but definitely I'm not looking for them. It's more of like, if I have one fall in my lap and it makes sense, yeah, I'll do it. But yeah, I kind of let that die on the vine a little bit, just because, it's tougher now, much tougher. It's, there's a lot more price reductions. It's the interest rate environment makes it harder. People don't want to sell. People aren't willing to accept lower pricing. It's just a weird time. I don't remember, since I've been doing this for 20 years, I don't remember anything that's been exactly like this. It's always a little bit different. Each market is, a little bit different. But this one's just tougher to operate a flipping business in. And I'm burned out. Like, I've done so many of these, probably 300 plus flips over the years, that I just don't get any. Do I like making the money? Yeah, it's great. Do I like finding the deal? Do I like negotiating it? Yes. Do I like everything after that? No. I don't like dealing with inspection inspection addendums, doing all that stuff, managing contractors, just the whole thing. So I just got tired of the grind. And now I'm kind of more cherry picking, like, who I want to do a deal with, what deal do I want to do? Do I want to try development, redevelopment? Those are so I'm kind of getting to do the shiny object thing without having to be so like crazy busy and flipping. Cause we were doing, when it was kind of at our peak through probably 08 through, I don't know, 2012 or 2022. No, I got those wrong. I'm old. 2018 through about 2022, we were doing between 3 to 5 a month, right? And we didn't have any staff. It was managing crews, like me, managing the lead flow. I handled marketing. We kind of divided and conquered. I had one business partner in that. And then that we made a lot of money. I mean, we made a lot of cash, and that was my, you leave your job, right? I left a 6-figure job in 2017 to do real estate full time, and I had to generate income, right? My wife got laid off, less than 6 months after I left my job, and she was making about the same thing I was, if not more. So I was like, oh boy, now I got a $250K hole to dig out of just to be scratch with what I was before. So it's like I had to make some moves, and I knew how to do it. But long-winded answer to your question is, yeah, I'm definitely not flipping as much or as intentionally as I have, but I will still do it.
So what are you looking at more now as you mature in your Real estate.
My golden years. I tell you what, man, ever since we started liquid lending, which was in 2020, it's been 5 years now, and that business has grown and grown and grown. It's hockey sticked over the last 5 years, and we've gotten a lot more capital. We've done a lot more deals. We've got more borrowers. We've gone to different markets. And that is what's cool, is because I get to look at and kind of participate in all these deals, and some really crazy and cool ones that we've done that I would have looked at one time, but I'm like, I don't want to do that. Now I kind of get involved, but I don't have to do all the hard work.
Living vicariously.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and we get to hear the stories and whatever, and look at all this, and then so I like the fact that I'm able to kind of like keep my knife sharp by learning new things still, even though I've been doing this. I'm kind of an old dog in real estate here, 20 years. But this lending business has kind of rejuvenated me a little bit, because I still get I can talk to all these people and borrowers, and I have something they want, and they have something I want. So we can find kind of a mutually, beneficial conversation, and the deals, man. I just love deals.
I remember the $1 million net worth threshold. It seemed like it took forever to break through.
Yeah.
That was it. And breaking through that, it's 1 to 5 is pretty quick. But there's a ceiling there's a 5 million mark, a 10 million mark. And the same is true in business with, you obviously have business partners in that. But what have you found that was unexpected with each ceiling that you've broken through? Like, for example, in the trucking, like I thought that I could use QuickBooks to process money. Turns out when you process $50,000, they flag it because it's an irregular activity. Exactly.
Yeah.
And so then they froze my money for 3 weeks. And that was something I didn't expect, but I wouldn't have known that if I wasn't transferring large funds.
Mm-hmm. So what have I learned?
That breaking through each threshold,
Yep.
that with the scale comes more problems.
Yeah, with the scale definitely comes more problems, but I think with the scale comes a lot more opportunities too, because if you start getting a little bit of recognition and a little bit of experience in getting deals closed, that's who brokers want to work with, right? They want sellers and brokers. They want somebody they know is going to close. They want certainty. So when you're getting more and more deals under your belt, you get the experience level, and you start getting a little bit of not notoriety, but recognition for that. I think it gets easier there. You deal with different problems, right? And the problems have another 0 or 2 zeros on them than you're used to dealing with. So I always tell people, like, I meet with a lot of newer investors, and the biggest thing is like, well, they can't wrap their mind around, doing a deal where you're going to make, $100,000, $500,000, and those happen. Right. But I'm like, look, it's all relative. When I was where you are right now, 20 years ago, and $5,000 seemed like an enormous amount of money. I mean, that represented, 40 hours of my time. Mm-hmm. And that's how I always looked at it. Was back then, it was like my time translates to X. And so if I'm spending this many hours, or if I'm making this much money, that represents this much of my time. But shifting that into leveraging not just, money, but people, and realizing, I think for me, a lot of it came when I started acknowledging what I'm good at and what I'm not. And when you're really honest with yourself, because everybody has an ego, right, that you carry around, and you think, oh, I'm good at everything. And you have kind of this facade you put up, but like, I know what I'm not good at now. And I'm perfectly fine acknowledging the people that are way better at it than me and involving them. If they can show that they can handle something, I have a hard time letting things go until somebody proves that they're adept at handling whatever the problem is. If they can prove that, I don't want anything to do with it. Like, do your thing, you know what I mean? So I think when you start getting bigger, you start getting out of being a solopreneur, which is really, really hard, because you have to put on your marketing hat, drive leads, and you got to take off your marketing hat and operate it and get it sold or whatever. And then you're like, oh crap, I forgot to market. So then you got to start all the way over, right? It's just hard to find that good, continuous improvement, because you're trying to do so many things with so many people. It's like cooking for 8 kids, or what do you have? 8? 7, sorry.
Way off.
Yeah. But you know what I mean? So like, I think the higher up you go, absolutely, that first $1 million of net worth, I mean, it seems like it's never going to happen. You look at your, year over year spreadsheet on your PFS, and it's like, man, I'm $50,000. And it's like, how many $50,000 do I have to make to get to $1 million? That's a lot. But then compounding interest takes over, principal pay down if you're buying rentals. And then, the market appreciation does its thing, and it doesn't take as long as you think. I mean, when you got 20 or 75% leverage or 80% leverage on stuff, and the market's done what it's done, you look pretty smart, pretty fast. And so I think when you're in the right timing can really accelerate your net worth, breakthroughs, but you can still do it. I mean, it's just time. I think you get into this business and you have to give it 10 years. I think there's so many people that made a lot of money really fast when the market was really good that they had a false sense of what actually was real. But I think you got to do it 10 years. Otherwise, you're going to set yourself up for markets that are just going to crush you when they go sideways.
And I think time is the most important because that's the biggest freedom that we're all fighting for. And what you said earlier about moving away from the flipping, it sounds to me like that's a time problem because the time, as you achieve more scale and your portfolio gets bigger, the time it takes you to generate another 100,000 means you got to do four or five flips, or you do one multifamily deal. And so I think that's the biggest thing with scale is, granted, with the multifamily comes other problems. If you're doing a single family, you make a 5% mistake, you lose $2,000. You know? But if you're doing a multifamily, you make a 5% mistake, that's 500,000.
Well said. Yeah. I was talking with Ryan before we recorded, and we interviewed a guy named Ian Ziegler, who's actually his episode's going to drop tomorrow. But he had a really interesting take on this. And we were talking about basically you have to eat, right? You can't eat equity. So you get involved in real estate. And I think, Ryan, back to your point, when you and I had that talk and you said, well, what do you mean? You know, everybody goes broke eventually. And you get the premise, right? Everybody that's involved in real estate investing, you keep dumping your money back into deals and you can't eat equity. So you got to have something that's going to pay your bills. And I think that's a lot of times too, what washes out the people that are involved in this business is, it was easy when you were burn everything and you could burn out 100+% of your deals. And maybe you flip here and there and you can make a really good living. You make a couple hundred, 250 grand, 300 grand. And then it gets harder. And then you're like, oh man, now I can't pay the bills. So you got to have something else going on that's going to generate that stuff. The nice thing about real estate is there's so many different offshoots of investing to generate cash. You can do property management, you can broker, you can syndicate, you can do all these things to generate chunks of cash. But what Ian said was there are cash conversion cycles. And I'm like, what do you mean by that? And he said, flipping, you got about 4 to 6 months. That's a cash conversion cycle. It's a chunk of money. And then if you spread that out over a year, you do a few of those, there's your yearly income. And then a bigger deal, maybe it's going to take a couple of years to buy and reposition a multifamily. Then you refinance it, put agency debt on it. And then that's a money event. That's a cash conversion cycle. That's a 2-year cycle. And then you looked at, maybe you get into a deal where it's a longer hold time. You're projecting 5 to 10 year hold, depending on market conditions. That's a longer cash conversion cycle. But if you start stacking those, they're just going to start happening like over and over and over again. It's like a money bomb going off. It's just how quickly is it going to happen, how short the fuse is, and all that.
One of clips that I did on the podcast, I was talking about basically the same thing. Like if you just buy single family houses, put each one on a 1-year thing, by the time the first one's paid off, you can just refinance it, get your money out, and then kind of live off from that. And I don't know if people just thought I was an idiot or like what, but talking about your cash conversion cycle, like that's basically what I was saying in that. And you just refinance it, and people were like, "Dude,
it was like our most viewed video."
It was our most viewed. People like tore me up and like telling me I'm an idiot and this, that, and the other. But it's basically exactly what you're saying there. Like you don't make any money on the first 15 years, but you can start to live off from it after a while. So.
And I'll tell you, man, I've been, this is my 20th year doing this. So 2005 I started, 2025 now. It's super weird to now be the age that I am, because I don't think, like, I don't walk around thinking like, oh, you're 50. Like, I don't feel that way at all. I still feel like 1990 was 10 years ago. It's really weird. And then people are like, oh, sir. And they're like, I'm like, no, don't call me sir. Until I look in the mirror and there's a harsh reminder. But no, I think it's really, okay. When I don't know how to quite to put this, but when I was reading all the books, when I first started trying to learn all this stuff, podcasts, books, whatever, right? Anything I could read, Bigger Pockets, people would talk about, oh, you can, to your point, you buy one of those a year for 10 years, and then you can just start harvesting that equity after 10 years go by. And then you just do it the next year with a different property and so on and so on. Right. And I'm like, that sounds amazing, and financial freedom. And in my head, I was always like, all right, and set myself up for later. This is later Owen. And I'm living it now. I will say it is pretty awesome because like I have paid down so much on a lot of these that I've held for a long time where I could sell them. Maybe I just want to declutter and get rid of some of my single families, which I've done, I think 3 or 4 sales this year, single families where I have 100,000, 150,000 in equity. I mean, that's pretty sweet. Now, granted, I'm going to get, I'm really going to get kicked in the balls at tax time. But
Sam's going to be happy for you.
I know. But I did time it because this year I have a gigantic cost seg that we're going to be doing that that should wipe out a big chunk of that. So that's kind of my method behind my madness.
Just did my first one.
Nice. Yeah.
It's like roughly $250,000 in cost savings.
That's
taxes,
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's real money too.
Yeah.
That's crazy to see when the straight line, the first multifamily we bought, the straight line was like $50,000, but the cost seg was like $600,000. It's like insane.
Yeah.
Yeah. I tell you what does suck though is when you sell one that you cost segged, and also I'm in the process of selling one that I did a 1031 exchange into after doing a 1031 exchange before that. So I have like a domino effect, and then I did a cost seg. So yeah, this one's gonna probably hurt.
Recapture.
Yeah. So that's the thing that the unsexy part of it. I always got to pay the piper.
So you mentioned like when you still got bills to pay.
Yeah.
So how do you discern when to take a draw and when to keep reinvesting? Because that's a trap that I keep falling in. Is I just want to reinvest, and my wife's like, why are we putting $150,000 into this house, but we need carpet at our house?
Yeah.
Because I can't depreciate the carpet at our house.
Yeah. The cobblers still learn to have no shoes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So that's a good question. I think it's highly variable on what your life is like, right? How much money you have. But I think, if we're keeping it all on the same starting line, I have right now, okay, so when I was operating my flipping business, that paid the bills. That was my day-to-day money. We travel money, kids, whatever, all that. That's how we paid the bills. When that has kind of dried up, right? So that's, call it $250 in income, depending on the year, could be a little more, a little less. That's a lot of money, and that's no longer coming in. But I started the lending business, 5 years ago, and that's eclipsed that. So the question is, how do I decide when to distribute or when to reinvest? The lending business is not real estate, but it's tied to real estate. So all my money is active income off there, right? So it's a partnership, and then we distribute based on ownership percentages, and we typically will just let that money build up. And then, when we're like, hey, I could use and so we all basically collaborate on that and say, okay, yeah, we're going to distribute X. So we were doing a pretty good clip there for a while where we do monthlies. But you have to kind of look at the projections and the year and how things are tracking and all that. That's the lending business. But I think it's with anything where you have income coming from stuff to pay other bills, as opposed, like I don't draw a dollar out of my rentals. Like I've owned this property that I was talking about that I have the cost seg and the 1031s. I haven't taken one dime out of that account in 4.6 years. So yeah, I guess leave it in if you can. Make smart decisions on what you're putting it back into, and don't blow it on stupid stuff, right?
Anybody that's listened to us this long, tell that you've been successful in real estate. And I would say in our circle, if you will, everybody, like you said earlier, everybody has an Owen story. Everybody, like, they flock to you at the meetups or whatever. You're involved with the RIA. You're on the RIA radio podcast. You're active in Collins. Well, I guess he doesn't do it anymore, but you were active in Collins meetup. You kind of took that over and made it into your own Thursday morning coffee meetup. So anyhow, my point of saying that is people flock to you and try to get to know you. How do you stay? I guess 2-point question. How do you stay grounded in that? And then also, where do you go for mentorship outside of that? Because if you're at the top of the echelon, you have to go somewhere else.
Yeah, that's a good question. How do I stay grounded with? I want to make sure I understand though. Are you asking like how do I not get a big head? Out of that?
How do you? Yeah, like because everybody tries to run to you.
Here's okay. I'll tie it back to this. So my like job that I had for a long time, my W-2, I was in recruiting. So I did for several different Fortune 500 companies: ConAgra Foods, IBM, Ricoh Americas, Compaq Computers. I worked for all of them. I was an agency headhunter for a while too. I got really comfortable interviewing people. So I did literally thousands and thousands of interviews over the years. Hired thousands of people. And I liked that. I liked interviewing and finding out people's stories. So I would always, if I ever sit down one-on-one with somebody, they always have a story to tell. It doesn't matter who they are, how inexperienced they are, whatever. I'm going to get it out of you. And so I have a natural tendency to just interview people. And I'm like zeroed in on their story when they're telling it to me. I'm not like distracted with it. And that's kind of to my detriment sometimes, because a lot of times I get wrapped up in conversations where I'm like, oh my God, it's like 30 minutes later. Was not planning on this. But I finally figured out, because you guys talk about, I know you're deep thinkers, and we've talked about how do you find your why and finding your why, and it gets thrown around all the time. Like, I think I kind of have mine figured out, and mine is more around, it's not the business, the money, the real estate success, having a podcast, all that. Fine. That's all fine. But that's not why I'm doing it. Like, I couldn't care less about this is a nice hoodie. The rest of them I have are like $5. You know what I mean? Like, I don't buy stuff.
Thanks
I don't
for dressing up for
Yeah,
us.
you're welcome. Yeah, this is my nicest hoodie. You know what I mean? So, but like, I don't do it for the status or the fame or any of that. I just do it because I love it. And I love meeting with people that are trying to figure it out. And if I can help you shortcut by telling you all the stuff I screwed up on, and at least, kind of like reach down and pull you over the hump here and help you on your way, that's what I love, man. And so look, can I go to a coffee every day a week with somebody? No, I can't. My schedule's different now, where I can't accept as many like one-on-one meetings and all the social. So I kind of have to pick my battles with that. I love the bang for the buck that you get out of having a meetup, a small meetup. I feel like those are my favorite places to operate. But yeah, so that answered the first part of your question, and I forgot the second because I've been rambling.
With being at the top of that food chain,
Yeah.
Where do you go for? How do you keep sharpening your skills?
Yeah. So the benefit of being involved and having a podcast and interviewing people of all different skill and experience levels and net worth and all that is I've learned something new from every single one of them that comes on. So I have a cheat code to mentorship, and that I don't actually have to do a formal mastermind or whatever, but I've had 250 episodes. I've interviewed 250 people. That is awesome. Like, every single time I've learned something, and and yes, I'm cheesy and I re-listen to some of them, but I like to hear what I missed because I'm so like generally locked into that conversation that you kind of forget after a while. But so that's one thing. But then the second thing is, the more deals that I've done with partners, I meet their friends, their connections, people they've done business with, and that has been kind of like a natural level up with the way they operate. And so, yeah, the partners I have 7 business partners in different entities and businesses, and they are all super smart, and they all have different skills and abilities than I do, and they all have different network than I do. So being ingrained and getting the opportunity to just kind of live in their, ecosystem, that's a cheat code.
What's the favorite deal you've done?
Ooh, that's a good one. Oh man, I would have to say I had an awesome wholesale one time where we made about 110,000, and we owned it for like a week, and we just cleaned it. So that was a pretty cool deal. That was in like a Happy Hollow area.
We all got beers after that.
Yeah. I bought everybody drinks or whatever wherever we were. That was
the eclectic one. That was kind of a little different.
Yeah. And they had like an attic above the attic that had like a ton of square footage that was like didn't even go up there, so I didn't realize
bidding war.
Yeah. So that was the good times. And then I don't know. I've had other deals where I bought the Fifth Avenue hotel that got converted into apartments, right, in the 80s. And I bought that deal, historic building. That was I have so many stories about that place, like everything from Molotov cocktails to like a naked dude in the lobby making a gingerbread house with a steak knife. Like, I've had a crackhead break into the storage room and pulling everything out of there, air conditioners, appliances. The elevator would just randomly open into the penthouse apartment where people were staying. Yeah. So like, I have stories for days about that place, but I probably learned as much as I have on any other deal that I've owned by buying that property. So I have a little bit of a special place in my heart for that deal. But I also just sold my very first rental property that I ever had. And, so I owned it for 20 years and I just sold it. So I kind of have a little, no, not at all, actually. I didn't know how I was going to feel. I knew I would feel some kind of way about it, but after the dust settled and I was like, got my 6-figure check out of that, I was like, I don't have to worry about that anymore. I don't have to deal with the tenants calling and whatever. So that was, that's probably another. You always remember your first,
No.
Do you think that people should start their real estate career self-managing or getting professional management to handle it?
Self-managing, and I would debate anyone on that. Yeah. You don't know what you're paying for if you don't know what's actually involved. And the only way to know what's involved is to deal with the phone calls, to deal with the leasing, to deal with all that stuff. Now, I will say, I think you should self-manage, but I also think you need to be 100%. You need to know as much as possible about the landlord-tenant law and the state you're operating in, because you can get in some hot water with discrimination, with inconsistent processing of applications, all kinds of stuff like that. So know your stuff, but do it yourself. Eventually, when you get to a point where, and I don't know what you guys think about this, but I think there is a magic number of doors that you can handle when you're working a W-2. And I think it's 20. I got to about 20 and stuff's really started falling apart. So maybe it's a little bit for them, but I think it's between 15 and 20 that you can manage no problem. Beyond that, it starts getting stressful, especially if they're like single families. And so you have 20 different addresses, 20 different roofs, sets of tenants and all that. I think it's a little more, that's how I started. But I think I think everybody should self-manage. And then when you get to a point where you understand it, you know what you're paying for, then get referred to the right property manager for you. So
I had this similar type of question for my men's group. We're both in a Christian men's group separately, but I brought concerns. I said I need to look for my next hire for the trucking company, and I need some kind of metrics to decide, should it be a bookkeeper, should it be a dispatcher, should it be an operations manager? How do I discern when I'm ready to do that? And I was hoping that they'd say, okay, when you have 6 months of reserves and this, that, and the other, and then they said, well, when you're stretched thin, then you'll know what you need. I hated that answer, but it was probably the one that I needed at the moment because, I found that bookkeeping is not my strong suit. Dispatching I'm good at, but it takes my time away from other things. So those are my first 2 hires. And I think what you're saying is when you get stretched to that capacity, you'll know that you're ready for a manager.
Yes. Yeah. And I gave it a test run with a guy that was kind of in my ear about turning my portfolio over to him. So I had about 20. And I'm like, look, I don't want to, I've worked so hard to build up all this cash flow by self-managing, and I'm saving so much money by doing it. And, I was like, buy enough rentals where your monthly income exceeds your expenses, and then you can replace your income and you're free, right? Time freedom. Quit your job if you want. But I looked at 20 of them and I bought those and rehabbed them and leased them and did all the things. And then I was making like $2,000 a month, whatever, $3,000 a month. And I'm like, I can't retire from this. And meanwhile, I'm having kids and my expenses are going like this. So I was just like,
and he's asking for you to give him
$3,000 exactly. So I'm chipping away at the money that I worked so hard for. So what I did was I turned over, I'm like, look, start with 1. So show me what we can do here. He had at least in like less than a week, and it was probably for $150 more than I probably would have advertised it for. So he literally paid for itself. And I'm like, oh my, I'm so dumb. So that was a big light bulb moment for me. And then I started kind of turn over more as they became vacant. I would just kind of transition over to them and have them handle the leasing. And I was just like, this is the way. And then I got freed up to do more. But I don't think I would have been in a position to make that decision unless I would have gone through the gauntlet of 20 of those. It's probably different for everyone, but I would highly suggest anybody that's getting started self-manage.
And I think because I like metrics, I think that there is a tangible number to that, and whatever that is for the individual. But if you have 20 units all renting for about $1,000 a month, that 10% fee that you would pay a manager, like you said, equates to $2,000 or $3,000. If your time is worth more than that $3,000, then it makes sense to hire a manager, because then you can do 20 more. And I think that's the metric that makes most sense. And I tell people, break down your calendar, do the 15-minute increment drill. You look at where all your time's going, and then assign $1 per hour to each one of those tasks. Checking your email is a $5 an hour task. So every time, if you value your time at $100 an hour, every time you're checking your email, you're losing $95. And so when you frame it that way, then it's much easier to delegate and feel like you're gaining rather than losing. And that's what gap in the gain. If you're only looking at, I'm losing this 10% per month, then you're always going to be thinking that you're taking a loss hiring a manager.
So why'd you ask the men in your men's group if you knew the answer?
Well, sometimes you need, and that's part of why I like that group is I'm the youngest in my group by like 20 years. Like everyone in there is in their 50s, 60s, and they've been running businesses. And so just hearing how they operate, because I saw what are those GIFs? We can debate that later, but
GIF.
Yeah. So I saw one of those where they showed the top 10 companies of all time, and when IBM and everyone's cycling, and there's never been a company that's been in the top 10 consistently for I don't remember if it was like 10-year period, but they showed it for the last 100 years how they're always cycling. And so I believe that a company that is still operating after 20 years are doing something right. And if I can figure out what that one thing is from them and one thing from them, then I can implement those in my business. Even if I think I know the answer, I want to hear what worked for them.
Yeah, I was thinking back while you were talking to the kind of the darlings of the business world from a company perspective. In the late 90s or like around 2000, it was like Microsoft, GE. You never hear. When's the last time you heard something about GE?
Mm-hmm.
Like they were like a blue chip company. Jack Welch, all the accolades went to him, kind of like Warren Buffett. Mm-hmm. But yeah, you don't hear anything about them anymore. Microsoft is kind of like an also ran now. It's like, yes, it's annoying. I have to have Windows.
Have you ever seen the rise and fall of Sears?
Oh, no, if that's a story or a book, I haven't read it.
No, I'm just saying that their backstory.
Yeah.
Yeah, how Sears blew up from the 80s into the 90s, and it was all retail, and then as the fall of shopping malls came and everything, they got into more finances. Like, so I can't remember the whole list of their subsidiaries, but they bought some really big, household name companies, and they chose to exit those companies to pursue this dying retail business. Mm-hmm. That was part of the book Quit. So
interesting.
Yeah. But I want to know more about light bulb moments. Like I really like those because it just shows that we're constantly growing, and there's constantly things. We're always trying to uncover the unknown unknowns, because the known unknowns, I know I can go find a book and improve this skill set. But the unknown unknowns is when you get into a new venture and something happens that you're like, oh, that's how that works. So what are some other light bulb moments that you think were transitional in your career?
Yeah, I think a big one was the property management light bulb. Another one was, I did this for 12 years before I left my W-2. So I was working, 40 hours a week at my W-2, and then at nights and weekends, I was out looking for deals, working on projects, painting, all that stuff. So I probably had about a 60-hour window there where I was really busy, and then I had 2 young kids and a wife, and trying to manage all that. And it wasn't, it was stressful. It was what I wanted to do, but I wish I would have probably done things differently there. But I would say another major light bulb moment was the first time I really considered partnering, and how that could affect the landscape of what I was trying to accomplish. And the fact that you get to a point where, like, okay, I did it for 12 years. And if you're doing something that most people are unwilling to do for 12 years, you start to kind of feel maybe pride and like, it's a badge of honor that I've worked my butt off this long and for so hard. And your pride gets in the way a lot of times of what actually makes sense for you to do to get out of your own way. And that's what was a big light bulb moment for me, is just like, I'm not good at everything, even though I'm trying to portray that I am. I'm really not. And so when I met, Brandon was my first business partner with Red Ladder, our flipping business. And we dated, quote unquote, for about 6 months before we kind of pulled the trigger and decided to both leave our careers and go full time into this. And then after that, I was like, you mean I don't have to do all of this stuff that I'm normally used to doing? It was just super weird. It was a weird adjustment, not having control over everything. But once he proved that he was adept at doing those things, I was like, I'm such an idiot. Why did I hang on like grim death to all these responsibilities when I could have just found the right person and had them do stuff probably way better than me? So partnering was property management first, partnering second, and then the light bulb moment for me when I learned about the financing side of real estate, not just, and that was more of a process, not an event, but going through that, really the light bulb came on for me on how I can operate differently and look at deals differently and borrowers and just how to structure things and work with the people, and everybody brings something different to the table. So I don't know, that's just been really cool for me, just partnering with people, and I learn something new every time. And odds are they do so many things better than me that I can then adopt what they're doing and just blatantly rip it off, and it's for the benefit of both of us. So those are kind of some big ones in business, I would say.
The irony of the HR guy hiring people who's afraid to partner and hire people to replace his time.
Yeah, I was a lone wolf for 12 years. Yeah, and it was lonely, man. I remember, like I said, YouTube wasn't around. There were no podcasts. There wasn't much in the way of social media. Bigger Pockets wasn't around yet. I found this message board. I was looking for something, anything, any way to connect with somebody. Because like when you're involved in this, and I'm kind of weird, so I read a lot, and not all my friends did. All the people that I knew from developing relationships over the years, went to college with, and maybe hung out at the bars, whatever, played baseball. They didn't invest in real estate. They didn't have that thing that made me do things that other people weren't doing. Like I can't stop it. It's just like you meet somebody and after like 30, 45 seconds, you can tell if they got it. You know what I mean? Yeah. There's that something that they have where you're not going to accept your reality. You want something better. And I just could not find that commonality with my existing group of friends. And
there's no opportunity on MySpace.
Yeah, MySpace. I can tell you what.
Pre-MySpace.
I remember this. When I found MySpace, somebody had told me about it or whatever. I finally got on there, created my page, and then they went bankrupt. Like immediately after that, I was just like, "Well, that was fun." And then, no, when I started like desperately searching for information online, I finally found this, and it was called CRE Online. It was this dude out of Colorado, if I remember right, and it was basically a message board. It wasn't even a forum. It was just like random messages. And I read everything on there because it wasn't big, but there was a lot of good stuff. Negotiating, putting deals together, financing, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, what else is out there? And so I just kept Googling, and then finally came across Bigger Pockets in 2007 or 8. And I was like, oh my God, these are my people. Where has this been? And so that was just that was a light bulb moment for sure. But and then I remember this kid.
All 100 of y'all on there?
Right. I remember this kid. I was thinking about this on the way out here. There was, we were talking about meetups, right? So we have the coffee meetup, and then we have a couple of bigger meetups in town, and then the Westo and the Lincoln one. There's all these meetups, but there wasn't really anything like that. In 2006, 7, I joined the local RIA here. And there were 7 members, something like that. We met at an Olive Garden, right? Like once a month. An Olive Garden on 72nd. And, fast forward to this guy that I met on Bigger Pockets, same as you. I was looking for anybody local, and there wasn't very many. There was like 3 or 4 dudes. Matt Swisshelm was his name. I have no idea what he's doing now. But he's a younger kid, younger than me. And he's like, hey, I was thinking about putting a meetup together. You want to meet at Noli Pizzeria? And I was like, I don't know where that is. But I went, met him. There were probably 15 people there. And I was like, this is cool. And we started talking. And I'm like, man, I wish this was a regular thing. And then he was like, yeah, he did one more. And then that was it. And then it was like dead air until Colin started his meetup in whatever year that was. So, that was, joining meetups was another light bulb moment for me.
Before we let you go, before my dog tears down the door, but we've talked about, you've been successful, all that stuff. What does the next chapter of freedom look like to you? I guess kind of put a different take on what we normally ask people, but what's the next 20 years look like? What do you keep searching for?
Yeah, I think, I'm trying to think about this realistically because like I mentioned, I'm 50, right? Am I going to continue buying deals up till the day I die? Maybe. But I'm looking at things now from I have a daughter that's a junior. I have, and you guys both have kids that graduated, right? Yep. And so I have a junior that's coming up. That's going to be a big change when she's out of the house. And I have a 13-year-old that's got, probably 5 more years in the house. So I'm like, well, what does that mean? And I have aging parents, right? So my parents are 79 and 78. And my wife's parents are even older than that. And I have an 87-year-old mother-in-law, right? So things are going to look dramatically different. And rather than try and plan out my next 20 years, I just have to, I'm looking at like, okay, I want to enjoy as much time as I can with my parents and my kids while they're still around. And I want to not be so bogged down in everything that I'm doing that I have to do for work that I can't on a random Friday just say, you know what, I'm going to go watch my daughter's volleyball game, or I'm going to go do this and that. So I want to be mindful of my time. I try not to do any meetings on Fridays at all other than the podcast. And I just try to manage my calendar so that I can do a lot more freedom. Big picture, what I want to do, I want to do deals, and I want to probably do some more development work. So I have a piece of land in Council Bluffs under contract that's like 22 acres. We're doing all the city planning meetings, TIF, entitlements, those type of things, environmental. Those are cool and different and new, and that's not just the same like another house flip or another multifamily property or whatever. So I want to keep doing different things still within real estate, but I want to, I just love the people I work with, man. Despite me wanting to strangle them and probably vice versa on a day-to-day basis, they're great dudes and gals, and they make me better. So I just want to do cool stuff with cool people and be able to dictate my calendar to an extent and spend time with my family and do the stuff I enjoy.
What's your philosophy for succession planning, like setting your kids up? What do you believe about that?
Okay, so I think about it like this. I came from a family that was my dad worked hard, and my parents were both entrepreneurs. They gave me the belief system that I didn't think there was anything I couldn't do when the whole time I was growing up. I was always really motivated, a nerd, and really competitive. And so I got into sports, baseball specifically, really dialed into that. And I really grew up with the belief that I just had belief in myself. And I was like, I think I can do anything I set my mind to. And that came from my parents. They didn't have any roadblocks or any, baggage that they carried from how they were raised that they put in front of me that said, you should be realistic. You shouldn't do this. So I just had this belief where I was like, I can do anything I want. I just have to figure out what that is, because I didn't know what I wanted to do when I grew up. Still don't. But succession planning, I figured it out. I got student loans when I went to college. I tried to get as many scholarships as I could. I did all the essays and all that. But I had to get student loans, and, got those paid off, and I survived, and I figured it out, and I struggled. And I don't want to give my kids a silver spoon where they're going to not have to work or just have a life on easy street. So I want them to be able to struggle and figure their own way. But I also want to give them more, give them some tools to get there and teach them about business and real estate. And if they choose to go that route, and maybe they want to work with me someday, great. I'm not going to force it down their throat. But they, we talk about money all the time in the house. Now, when I say all the time, that's not the focus, but I mean, we don't restrict our financial conversations. We talk about what things cost. And my older daughter's gotten really good at recognizing what her time for money is, and does she really need that thing that she wants to buy, because she knows she's going to have to work to get it. And so we pick and choose basically on what they spend their own money on. Like, we'll pay for food. And I made a deal with my kids a long time ago. I will pay for books whenever you want to buy them. I don't care if you want to buy them as opposed to go to the library. Yes, you could say that's maybe a better lesson, go to the library. But one of their favorite things to do always was go to the bookstore. So I loved going with them because I'm a lifelong learner, and I want them to enjoy the same thing. But when it comes to succession planning, I don't want to give them everything like the keys to the kingdom, but there'll be money in a trust. Probably when they're 25, they'll be able to, get access to a chunk of that. Obviously, we're going to pay for some of their college. I still think they need to pay for some of it as well to appreciate what they're doing and not major in underwater basket weaving. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I want them to go into this with their eyes open and say, I'm ready for life. I don't have this huge safety net, but we're going to support them and provide, but also I want them to struggle. so they can figure it out on their own.
One thing that we've been testing out is, our kids, we try and involve them in everything we can. They're doing demo work at Flips, they're mowing lawns, they're, now with the trucking company, my son does the dispatching. So I pay him a commission for that. But what we're trying, I don't remember whose video we saw, but we're keeping a log of all of their commissions and all the pay, if we're paying them flat rate, hourly, whatever. So they know exactly what they're getting paid, but they don't get that in cash. They're at the end of the year, we're going to take that dollar amount and then we're going to tell them, you can go take this money, invest it into the stock market. You can invest it in one of our properties. You can invest it in one of our businesses, but you can only spend the distributions you get from those investments. So if you put in the stock market, you can spend the dividends, you can't spend the principal. And so just showing them that snowball effect. They were at the dinner table last night, kind of going back and forth, like, we can't actually touch that money. But I think that in the long run, it'll pay off and they'll see the fruits of it.
Yeah, I like that. We recently got the Venmo card,
Yep.
So you can load it with they can load it with money, you can load it with money, and then they have to make choices, right? It's not just like, hey, Mom, will you buy me this? Hey, Dad, will you buy me this? They have to be like, okay, how much is on here? You know what I mean? And tying all that back. But my kids are also a little, I don't know what the current kids that are in like junior high and high school are. I can only operate off of what I know with mine, but they have no interest at all in AI. None. Like they give me a hard time about it. Like, ooh, what did ChatGPT say, Dad? And I'm like, you guys should really pay attention to this. This stuff is moving really fast and it's not going away. But I don't know. I feel like sometimes I just want to go analog again, man, and just ditch the cell phones and exist how we used to.
I told my wife that earlier, or the other day. I was like, I just want to throw this thing away and never see it again.
Yeah.
So I like it from the computer aspect. I hate it from a phone, texting, all that stuff. So, someone watched this and stuck around to the end and want to get a hold of you, especially if they're local. Meetup, is that your best way? Go to your Thursday?
Yeah, I love that. So, Caffeine and Cap Rates. It's every Thursday at 10 a.m. at Sozo Coffee House, 1314 Jones Street. So we have a meetup there. It's any topic. So we talk all about real estate, business, partnerships, financing, you name it. It's a different, it's a jukebox of topics. I'm also on Owen Money Real Estate. That's my handle on Instagram. So you can always find me there. RIA Radio. We've got our podcast. It'll be on all Spotify and all the stuff. So that's usually the best way.
In summary, Google me.
Google me. That's so embarrassing.
Well, we don't have a fancy sign off, but maybe we could call him Google or Owen Google me. Dashner. So, Owen, appreciate it.
This is awesome. Yeah, thank you guys. Great seeing you again.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.